Welcome to the Baseball Forward podcast. Guys, listening to this episode today, this is episode 25 of the Baseball Forward podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening and supporting Coach Schwanke and I. Man, it's been pretty cool watching the numbers go up and the attendance go up, and we hope we're providing some value. Today, episode 25 is going to be the start of a new thing for us, and it's going to be called Storytime with Schwank.
Mouthful.
Yeah, that's a mouthful. But it hit us, a little while back. Coach Schwanke, Jim Schwanke, is one of the best storytellers in the history of mankind. And what we're going to do here is we're going to get this guy talking baseball. So this is a segment that we're going to have weekly or bi-weekly. We'll figure it out based on feedback. But I know this, whenever I get an opportunity to sit down with Mr. Jim Schwanke, I love just listening to him talk about stories and baseball stories. And I want to invite you guys into our conversations. So Jim Schwanke, I'm just going to start with this and say, how does it feel to have a segment named Storytime with Schwank?
Well, we wrestled with it a little bit, but that's a nickname that I've had for a long time as a player. And my son and I were called Big Donkey and Little Donkey, because of our leg kick that we had as hitters and stuff, and what we taught as a hitting coach. But Schwank's been with me since I was a little guy.
Yes, sir. So story time with Schwank. Gosh, there's so much going on in your brain. And as we were kind of, as we're leading off with this one today, the thing that I want people to get inside of your head and I want them to understand baseball kind of the way you see it and the way you understand it. So I want to lead with this topic, and the topic is going to be winning. You were at LSU, you were at Oklahoma State, you were at LSU, you're a 3-time national champion. I mean, truly stories that defined college baseball in this era that has just watched college baseball take off. You were a part of that. You were a huge part of that. So I'll go with this. I know it had to feel good when you guys used to show up to the park as the LSU Tigers, or I'll even say the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Give me something that kind of comes to your mind when we talk about winning. Is there did you guys ever show up to the park? Did you always know eyeballs were on you? Eyeballs were on players? What did that feel like walking into the stadium knowing you were who you were?
Well, it goes back to when you were a youngster, playing in high school at Saguaro High School in Tucson. Hal Eustace was the first guy that kind of got us to understand as players that his focus was on the last game. And then it went into junior college, and Coach Ward was focused on winning the last game, as was Skip Bertman. I mean, Skip Bertman's 5-0 in national championship games, which is, how do you ever top that? I guess you got to go 6-0, right? Virtually impossible to attain that. So, my whole mindset as a player was I was taught to understand that the things we were working on was to help us win and perform in championship situations. And so even when I went back and started teaching my son on our DBAT stuff, our McKinney Marshall's teams, it was about how to get our guys to understand we wanted to win the last game of that tournament, right? We wanted to play against the best teams and win the last game of that tournament. And that went back to practicing, full speed as often as possible, and understanding that you have to overcome adversity in the middle of a baseball game. It's going to happen. Coach Ward at Oklahoma State we'd be down 10 and he'd yell in the dugout, "It's about even now." I mean, that mindset. I mean, you're down 10 in a baseball game and your head coach is saying, "Nah, it's about even now. Let's go." You feel that and you understand that. And comebacks and things that happen in regionals in Stillwater when we came back from huge deficits in a regional to go to Omaha, going to Arizona State when they were number 1 in the country and beating them twice out there was amazing. But that's the head coach's philosophy and mindset, was to get us set to win the last game, and everything that went into that and everything that we failed at. I mean, there were times when Skip Bertman would say, "Hey, we got to lose a game."
Wow.
And you know, wait a minute, we're 19-0. Why we got to lose? Well, you got to, you need to. And I mean, he put guys on the mound that he thought would lose the game for us, and they'd throw 7 innings and we'd win. So those things went on a lot. And it's all to keep guys grounded and understanding how to work. It's no fun to lose, but at some point you got to understand in baseball, you're gonna lose the game. The secret is to be prepared and be healthy to win the last game.
Did you, because I want to know this, because there's so many people that don't have the experience. Man, Jim, I played baseball a long time, and I've been in and around the game a long time, and I never had the experience of winning the last game. And even I'll take it, walk it back a step. Oklahoma State, LSU. Did you know that when you were in that era, the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, did you know that this was like history that was being made? Because I think about it right now, I fell in love with the game of baseball in that era, and that was like the golden age, but that it propelled college baseball to the level that it's at now. Could you feel that in that era? Did you feel like college baseball was taking off? Did you feel like you were a part of something that was just massive?
Well, you really, at times you didn't feel it till you got to Omaha, right? Because the TV coverage was sporadic back in the day. Now everything's on TV, and you got streaming, and you got all these different avenues that allow fans and families and young players to watch older players play at every level. I mean, I just watched a stream of one of our minor league guys pitching in the Arizona Fall League.
Nice.
It's amazing how the technology has allowed it to blossom. And now you've got a shorter draft, so you've got a better talent pool actually that's going to college, so that the players are getting more and more physical. And that started back then. I mean, our Arizona team, I mean, good Lord, our 3-hole was, the player of the year, Dave Stegman. Our 4-hole was Steve Powers, who was our Friday night starter.
Wow.
Right? Kind of a Caglione kind of guy.
Wow.
And Ron Hasse was our catcher. Catcher on the infamous Eckersley backdoor slider that Kirk Gibson hit out of the ballpark.
Yep.
That was a huge physical team. But that year, Arizona State beat us 7 times in a row.
Dang.
Before we finally beat them in Omaha once.
Wow.
Finals. They were so talented. I mean, I can remember in junior college coming down from Yavapai to play the Arizona State JV. And on that JV team at Arizona State back then, they had 7 future big leaguers playing on their JV team.
That's crazy.
So, and then USC dominated with Coach Dado.
Rod Dado.
And the ability that he had to augment his scholarship program, which is a whole nother story. But great coach, great recruiter, great players, dominant. Arizona State, dominant. Jerry Kindle at Arizona had a series of winning and then being quiet for a few years and won 3 national championships. So all that stuff built. Oklahoma State, Coach Ward had the vision. I got to build a stadium so I can host regionals. And then he takes Oklahoma State to Omaha, I believe, 7 times in a row. And so those things were all evolving during that time. But when you're doing the day-to-day work, you're just trying to build the program, find the best players you can, and get them involved in a culture that allows them, to win. My high school career, our best team was my junior year, and we lost. We won the state championship my senior year with a lesser talented team. In junior college, my freshman year at Yavapai, we set a record for the best league record and lost. Sophomore year, we won it with a lesser talented team. In Omaha this year, Tennessee won with a senior starting pitcher.
Yep.
Versus A&M, who lost their best player, their NIL that they brought in from Stanford, Montgomery. Caden Kent steps up and has great games to lead them there and get them into the championship game. A guy that was loyal and stayed in the program. Those things are so fun to watch. And so I think character and understanding and trusting your coaches and staying in the programs now is really important to give you a chance to win the last game. It's the same thing in select baseball with kids. They all want to change teams when they don't get to play all the time.
Yep.
And in reality, that coach doesn't want you to fail. They want you to get better. They may not be doing it the best way, but there's a lot of coaches, and myself included, made a lot of mistakes evaluating talent. I mean, I can still remember going to watch Max Muncy play, going, where the heck's he going to play defensively? And he's playing all over the place in the big leagues, and he's a great player.
Yeah.
He's been on World Series championship teams. Great player. But at the time, there's a lot of people that didn't know what Max Muncy was. But he had a big heart, and he kept playing. He stuck with it, went to college, and has become a star and a contributor to winning teams because he's got a big heart. And that's one of the things that coaches have to recognize in players.
I think talking with Jim Schwanke here on Storytime with Schwank, a new bi-weekly segment on the Baseball Forward podcast. So again, appreciate all you listeners out there. The goal with Storytime with Schwank is, baseball to me is just, oh man, I could talk about it nonstop. And I love hearing different perspectives and people's stories. And I imagine, Jim, that you've had moments. I've had moments in my career where I can it was frozen and I could remember what I was thinking. And I remember what I was doing and the way I was feeling. I want to know, if there were instances, because you've been around the game and at such a high level, Omaha, winning national championships, playing at LSU, Oklahoma State. Are there moments to you where you recall that you just sit and you think and you're like, man, it gives me goosebumps to think about it, or it makes me smile? When I say that, what comes to mind?
Well, one of the great rivalries for a while in college baseball was Oklahoma State and Wichita State.
Ooh, yeah.
And I can still remember, watching those two programs grow and evolve, from Gene Stevenson at Wichita State and Kimnitz that helped him from day one, build that from a field with a chain link fence to a day-night game against us when it's standing room only and people are throwing foul balls back at me, coaching third base. And it's a war between the two programs because they were both College World Series teams.
Yeah.
And that was just through the power of those two personalities as head coaches. And that moment, those moments will live with you forever. I mean, the Omaha thing is something that is, you can't believe it. We had kids. I get the job at LSU mainly because Skip Bertman asked me how we beat them in 1990.
Yeah.
And he said, LSU had 5 major league pitchers, might have had 1 or 2 more underclassmen, loaded team. And we beat them twice, OJ and Paul Bird, who obviously major leaguers and were phenomenal. Actually won national championship in the next year in 91 for LSU. So we're sitting there 5 years later in Millington, Tennessee at 11 o'clock at night, drinking Crown and Coke. And he asked me, how did you beat us in Omaha? And I said, Coach, we sat on curveballs. And he looked at me like, what, are you kidding me? I said, no, we knew you threw back-to-back curveballs. We didn't have the basic, all this technology now where you can really chart everything and know exactly what's going on with a 2-0 counter. But he threw a lot of back-to-back breaking balls. And we sat on them, and we didn't miss them. And we won. So he looks at me and he goes, can you teach that to my guys? I said, absolutely. And I said, I'll do you one better. If I find out the guy can't hit a curveball, the bad one, the one that hangs, I'll teach him how to take it. He goes, ooh, I like that. So I think that's one of the reasons I got the job. So now you fast forward it to LSU, and I'm meeting these players for the first time. And he's telling me he's got several of them that can't hit a curveball. And I sit him down. I go, hey, Cooley. Chad Cooley was an all-state player from Barb High School, football, baseball, combo guy, strong. Cooley, what curveballs do you swing at, Coach? I swing at all of them, you know. Okay, good. So we start working with Cooley, and you fast forward it. You go through these steps of the system, and he starts to understand which ones to really swing at and what to do with 2 strikes and not worry about getting jammed and the things that start to build in there. And we're sitting in the third base dugout. Skip has the microphone because he used it during inter-squad games to communicate.
Love it.
And Cooley fouls a 0-2 pitch over the first base dugout. He's a right-hand hitter. Just jammed and kind of floats over there. And I go, "Atta boy, stay right there." And Skip goes, what do you mean? I said, I just want him to stay right there. Don't worry about getting jammed. And the next one, he fouls it back over there again. I'm going, "Atta baby." And then he got a hanging breaking ball, hit it, halfway up the scoreboard. And I go, that's it. Cooley's learning. Cooley's made himself a better player, right? And so that's part of winning. Having the patience to help a player get better, and then being able to monitor it and see it happen and let them know that it's happening. So Cooley comes along, and we're pulling up to Omaha in June for the day before practice. They've been indoctrinated into the blast hitting system, and pulls up front. He looks at the stadium. He goes, "Welcome to Rosenblast Stadium." And I'm going, holy mackerel. They've bought into this thing, right? And so this thing builds in 96 in the World Series. It's us in Miami, the 2 programs that are heading for a collision at the end. And when Skip Bertman gets there for that meeting, before we get on the bus to go over for the national championship game in 96, he's a great motivator, and he ran out of things to say. He just didn't know how to handle it the night before he asked me. So I said, well, we got this insurance guy that says all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. He says, I like that. So we put it on an easel, and he runs through that. He showed the guys a picture of a ring. The meeting lasted about 5 minutes. Normally lasts 20 minutes to go. We'd have to go over scouting reports. We knew everything about them. They knew everything about us.
Yeah.
It was just going to be a moment in time where you play. And we go ahead, then we go behind. And I get Skip to come up. This is one of the goofy things in life. I get Skip to come up. There's a little blue pony wall at the end of the dugout, and I get him to stand on there when we're behind 7-3, and we score 2. Go back out, come back in. Hey, get up here. He stands up there. We score 2 more. Now it's tied, right?
Oh boy.
And we get to the top of the 9th, and he makes the decision to leave Patrick Coogan in while Eddie Yarnell's warming up in the bullpen, or All-American, future big leaguer with the Yankees. And he leaves Coogan in, and Cora gets the base hit. Now we're down. And I get Skip, come on, get up here. He goes, well, who do you want to have pinch hit for Wilson? I said, nah, Coach, we can't do that. Wilson's got us here. He's got, I don't even had a hit in the World Series. I said, he'll get on. Oh, so he's leaning on the wall. Wilson hits the double, couple outs. And then, of course, Warren hits the walk-off home run. And I just stand there. He talked about goosebumps and stuff. I just stood there and watched it all happen. And people are jumping around. Skip jumped, I think, running out on the field. I guess he jumped, 5-6 inches. But it was such a moment that you just sat there and watched it happen, evolve, and you're going, believe Warren Morris just delivered a walk-off game-winning hit, and he hadn't been able to play full speed probably until that day, or swing the bat full speed until that very day. And it was a moment. And so we're clearing around the field, and this is what made Skip Bertman great. He's always thinking ahead for the most part all the time. And he goes, man, I'm sure glad Warren hit that home run because I didn't want to have to explain why I left Yarnell in the game. And so one of the great moments in LSU history, if not the greatest so far, Skip's worried about a press conference that might have happened, and it didn't. And so those are winning moments. And again, those situations with Brad Wilt, leaving him in the game and then trusting things that would happen, didn't bunt. We had a guy at second base and nobody out. Skip made the decision to let Bowles swing away.
Gosh, I remember that.
And that's the winning attitude that permeated that dugout constantly, whether we were ahead or behind. We're only down 10. It's about even. And when you can convey that to your kids and not show panic and not show negative emotions when you're behind, miracles will happen. I believe that in my heart.
Jim, you talk about, man, I just want to I want to spill my guts and just be like, man, you start talking about some of these teams in my memories. Wichita State, Gene Stevenson, 1991, Creighton. Hey, Jamie Bluma was the closer. And I remember they made a big deal about him because he had like a lizard or something. And no joke, when I was done with pro ball, I'm in Kansas City and these guys asked me, hey, you want to go play in a men's league? I'm like, what? No, that's not what we do. I got convinced and I go, and I'm sitting in the dugout and I see this guy out there on the mound. I'm like, man, that looks pretty good. He's on my team. Jamie Bluma.
Yeah.
He comes into the dugout. We're on the same men's team in Kansas City on some random Sunday. And I remember thinking, man, Jamie Bluma, man. And I told him, I said, hey, you know that you're one of the reasons why, I love baseball was the way he pitched and how aggressive he was at Wichita State. But you say some of these schools, and I think Wichita State, I think Rice and Wayne Graham, I think Oklahoma State, Coach Ward, Holiday, I think obviously LSU, Bertman, I think Florida State, Coach Martin. These are giants in the game. And you were right in that mix. Do you, because I know the amount you and I talk at this point, I want to know that deep down you have the satisfaction of sitting back and saying, wow, that was pretty cool. What the heck just happened? Wow, that was pretty cool. Do you ever catch yourself doing that?
Yeah, there's moments when you go to a game, in my business now, we're looking at talent that has a chance to play at the highest level in the big leagues, which is a completely different animal than college baseball. There's emotion, there's fandom, there's all kinds of things that go on in college baseball that make it really, really special. And in pro ball, if you take that plunge, and you take that plunge, it becomes a job, and it becomes an everyday affair where the guys on the other side really want to whip you, and they don't care who you are. They want a job in the big leagues just like you do, and it becomes a different deal, and you need to be prepared for that. So when you go to a game now, I'm looking at guys that I think can mentally handle that. And I think most of them are better prepared for the eventual pro career by going to college, just like they do in the other sports. Go to college. There are phenoms. There are guys that can play in the big leagues when they're 19, 20 years old. But that is so rare. That is so rare. And I think you see that in the draft now where 80% of the draft is college guys. Yep. It's smaller. And so college baseball is now at its peak as far as growth and exposure. It's on a way to the peak, I guess. They're going to increase scholarships. They're going to increase opportunities for kids for the programs to pay for the players to be there. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves. I can't imagine. I'm at LSU. We had the advantage of TOPS. We had a state program that several schools had in our league that allowed them to. We were allowed to use academic scholarships by state to help players. But if you gave me 34 or 25 full rides at LSU, then it becomes a situation where the player and the family makes a decision on who they want to play for rather than an economic decision, which I always thought was kind of unfair. And back in the day, but now the NIL stuff's involved. And so it becomes much more interesting and much more, I don't know if lucrative or practical for a young man not to sign for $200,000 and go to college.
Because man, you said something that kind of triggered me, and because I'm in the midst of composing an 11U power baseball team, whatever. I want to say this, like the guy that I'm coaching with, Ryan Robertson, love him. You know of him. Great baseball guy. But we were talking the other day, and we're talking about the composition. So I want to get your take on this. But he's saying we don't want 12 very best players. We want some good players, and we want some role players. And we start talking about the composition. Not everybody can play shortstop and hit in the 3-hole, right? So when you were building those teams back then, and you were helping build those teams, like what did that look like? Did you guys just go out and try to get the best athletes? What was that like?
Well, that's a great question. And Ryan Theriot,
oh yeah,
will tell you, he was the third best player on his high school team.
Dang.
And I wanted all three of them from Broadmoor High School.
Where's Broadmoor? Where's Broadmoor High School? Louisiana. Yep. Okay.
Right there. So Rhino was the shortstop. Michael Woods was the second baseman. And a young man named Trey Duncan was the third baseman. Trey was strong, athletic quarterback. Michael Woods' dad played pro ball. And Theriot was the shortstop. Well, it was pretty evident that the other two were a little more tooled up than Ryan. Trey went out and hurt his knee his senior year, lost his status as a real prospect baseball wise. Eventually came back and played some college baseball. Michael Woods' dad, because of his experience in pro baseball, wanted Michael to stay on the infield, didn't want him to move to the outfield. Well, we had some young guys we had recruited that were in the program, so I couldn't take him. He went to Tulane. Eventually became a first round draft pick. So Ryan comes, and Ryan tells the story to the Baton Rouge Kins Clinic, where he says, I was never, ever the best player on my team. It wasn't in high school. I wasn't at LSU. And I sure wasn't on the St. Louis Cardinals with Pujols, or the San Francisco Giants, Posey, or with Aramis Ramirez and the Chicago Cubs. But he played, I think, almost 10 years.
Yep.
And was part of 3 World Series teams, I believe.
Wow.
And he was never the best player. And so that's a lesson and a story that should be told. And I will gladly tell it to your 11-year-old set of parents.
Yes, sir.
Your team. Because it's not about that. It's about becoming the best that you can be. And Ryan was driven to do that, even when pro baseball was whipping him. He made a decision to quit switch hitting, go back to right-handed only. Lou Piniella fell in love with him. He became an everyday player for the Cubs. And I get to go to, Wrigley Field and see my double play combination at LSU, Theriot and Fontenot, playing for the Cubs. And so
wow.
That's so in answer to your question is you got to find guys that want to be in the program. In LSU, the state of Louisiana, there where everybody wanted to be, for the most part, part of the program.
Religion down there.
And so, I couldn't take a young man named Juan Pierre from Alex High School because I had Mike Kerner in the program. We didn't have a roster the size of these guys have now. So I placed Juan Pierre and I asked him, to go to junior college, and he became a really good player. And then Cedric Harris shows up at LSU. So Juan Pierre goes to South Alabama. Well, Juan Pierre played in the big leagues forever and was a great, great player. And I couldn't take him.
Wow.
To LSU. And so you have to make those kinds of decisions. Didn't stop us from winning, right? But I would have loved to have Juan Pierre in our program.
Mm.
He would have paid the price to be part of that program because he came to our camps and worked and did everything with his high school coaches that brought him over there. And so we ran around trying to find guys that were going to show up to school because the draft was a big factor back then.
Yep.
Where guys would sign, 5th, 6th round, 7th round, they may sign, and you're not going to get them. And it happened real late because back then you could go to the first day of school before you signed.
Wow.
Right?
Yep.
And so guys like, Casey Daigle, who we recruited, didn't get him. He was committed to Tulane. He signed the day after the first day of classes with the Diamondback. So that kind of stuff went on. So you really had to find guys that were maybe just a notch below the talent level that you have now. And the state of Louisiana produced a lot of those kids. You go to a small town high school baseball game in Louisiana, it's packed, and you'll find a player that's hard-nosed, just like was in Oklahoma. There were kids at small schools in Oklahoma that were the bread and butter of our program at Oklahoma State. And so that was a tough thing to do back then. I mean, literally find guys that you thought could play and win the last game for you, but we're also going to show up and enroll and not sign. So,
yeah, that has to be tough. I mean, because it's a gift and a curse. I mean, if you guys want somebody at LSU, everybody else wants them, including pro guys. I want to close this session of Storytime with Schwank today. I want to close with I want you to kind of name some names of guys that you don't have to give me the memories or anything like that, but give me some names of guys that just really stand out, that you still have great relationships with, that you're so proud of the players they were. Because I feel like, man, it's amazing to me how impactful the good coaches can be. And I know that you told me the other day, we were talking about what does it take to be a good coach. And you said to me, Ross, you got to really honestly care about your players. You got to care about your players. You got to love the game. You got to care about your players. So rip off some names of some guys that you just have fond memories of, and that you'll go to your grave with knowing, man, those were the times, those were the guys.
Well, Brad Cresse, comes to mind right off the bat, mainly because he was raised in a baseball family. His dad was the bullpen coach for the Dodgers and ran camps in LA, and still does to this day, that are so well organized and attended. And he helps so many kids just explore and learn the game and fall in love with the game, which is exactly what he did with his son. And Brad was going to go to either Fullerton or LSU. He was recommended to us by a legendary scout. And he went into the Fullerton game on his visit, and they had runners at first and second. And Mark Kotze's coming to the plate, and he squared around a bunt. And the dad says, let's go, Brad. Nobody's bunting in the first inning. Well, that was Fullerton's philosophy. It wasn't ours. So he shows up at LSU, has a great career, gets the walk-off winning hit against Stanford, I believe, to win a World Series. Another situation where he struggled and then gets the game-winning hit to win the whole thing. And now he runs a series of select teams and facilities in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
That's awesome.
Helping kids learn the game and fall in love with the game, just like he did.
Yep.
His dad. And I think that's phenomenal. Theriot, the heart of a lion. Blair Barbier is another young man that, I got there and had a recruiting list given to me by Beetle Bailey, the former coach, and Blair was on there. He was a quarterback. So he didn't play that fall. And I call him. I say, Blair, I can't offer you a scholarship until I see you play. I've never seen you play. I will come to your first spring game, because he's a football player.
Mm-hmm.
we'll make a decision then. He says, okay. He's stuck with us. He's turning down stuff. And I go to, I think it was Crowley, Louisiana, some little old minor league park. It's Mardi Gras week. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and he hits a double right center field. The whole Barbier family is up there. There must have been 20 of them. Coach, come on up, you know. And I got a little LSU thing, and it's Mardi Gras in Louisiana, so they're offering me things that I had to turn down. And rested on the way back.
Did you really turn them down, Jim?
I had to. And Blair came to our program and became a leader and a champion and a guy that you would want to have behind you wherever you went to play a baseball game. And there's more and more. I mean, there's kids at Oklahoma State that paid the price to be there. The Brad Delicious, the Brian Ehlers, Brad Gore, who's the head coach at Enid High School.
Yeah.
Those guys are just, they're still coaching. They're still bringing the game to players in all kinds of different ways. And those are the kids that are just, I mean, you need to prep me for that one. I need to sit down and write names.
No way. No prep is the best because I want you firing from a hip. That's when you work at your best. I do have one more question for you though, because I imagine if my dad was Jim Schwanke, and let's just get this out in the open, Willie Schwanke, Jim's son, was a stud. Okay. Went to Arkansas, finished at Wichita State. I mean, this guy was a dude. This is how you want your son playing. But I imagine if I'm Willie Schwanke and my dad's Jim Schwanke, that I'm kind of like almost so thankful and awe, like because of what my dad does, and I love it. And now I have like built-in mentors. So I'd be curious. The question is this. For Willie, did he have like some favorite players that he gravitated to that from your past? Did he have mentors but that naturally were from the relationships that you had?
That's a question you have to, I don't know I've ever asked him that question. He when I was in Baton Rouge, he was really young. Mm-hmm. And he'd come to the practices, and my wife, and it's a great thing for young parents. You know, I laugh about this. She had a bubble making machine, and she'd shoot these things out. And he had that yellow wiffle ball bat, and he's hitting balls all over the place. And then when practices were over or games were over, we'd go into the cage, and I'd throw him a few balls and let him just wail away. But he was never really down on the field much. Okay. With the players. I had a belief that was not necessary and really didn't want him to be a distraction and do those kinds of things. And so we left Baton Rouge. He did play for a team with 8-year-olds when he was 6 down there. That was a guy that came to our camps, and they did a wonderful job putting him up against the fence so he wouldn't get hurt, picking balls up off the fence and hitting in the games and stuff. But he comes up here and he's so far ahead of the kids that we started playing in the Frisco Baseball Softball Association. First day of practice, he throws a ball to a guy and it goes between his head and the glove. And Willie looks at me and he goes, what do I do? What do I do? I said, slow it down a little bit. And so then we move. The next year we play in the Plano Baseball Softball Association, and we lost our first game something like 22-2. You know, oh boy, what did we get into? Well, that little core group that we had called the Texas Thunder, a couple big leaguers came out of that. Ooh. And a bunch of college players, and that became the basis for everything growing up. And I think Willie became like Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays, because he was kind of their namesakes. Ted Williams, he followed and looked at that kind of stuff all the time. And so he's more of a looking back at the old time guys. Yeah. More than he was really worried about who he was playing with. Now, when he went to Arkansas, Stanek and Barrett, there were really great players there at the time. Brian Anderson's played in the big leagues for a long time. So he played with some really good players at Arkansas and then at Wichita State. and he coached Alec Boehm for a little bit. And so he's had some run, and he's learned this career in videography that's phenomenal. He's very talented at that. And so that, again, was part of, he's learned that on his own. He took something he fell in love with, fishing, and turned it into GoPros and doing stuff for marketing for fishing companies. And now he works at Wichita State in their athletic department. But that's part of teaching your son and letting your son practice himself and teach himself, and just watching him grow, not trying to make him do everything that you want him to do. And that was sometimes hard for me as a parent to do that, but you had to let him fail, had to let him get knocked in the dirt, and then help him coach him through that. And it was fun to watch him grow into the young man that he is now. But I don't know that he had any players that he really more, followed that tightly, that closely.
You and I'm just going to keep this going because I want to hear it, man. From a baseball perspective, as a dad to Willie Schwanke, I know I admire the kid. Geez, the way he played. I love the way the kid played the game. Kid, he's 29, 30 at this point. But what were you most proud of from a baseball perspective? What were you most proud of about your son, Willie Schwanke?
Well, wow. As a youngster playing,
hey, everything has come and gone. His baseball career is over. When you look back at it, what were you most proud of him? Was it an accomplishment? Was it the way he played? Like, what do you sit down and because he accomplished a lot, but geez, I want more than, I know he's a good guy. Like, I get that. Like, he's a good kid. He's a good young man. But like, from a baseball perspective, if you're like being just a baseball coach, what would you say you were most proud of? Like how it all turned out?
Well, I think one of the things that was important is that he showed discipline and control. In this day and age, he'd take a couple buddies, and a couple buddies would take him, and they'd go fish and probably drink a beer and dip, do things that were really rowdy, right? And never had any problems. And so he was grounded in trying to become the best that he could be. And through his senior year, we had this rivalry with Rockwall Heath, and they were, a powerhouse, and Wakeland was kind of the unsung guy. We had the year we made it, Willie made it to the year Willie's team made it to the state tournament, we had to play in to get into the district playoffs and immediately play another game to see where we were seated. And our first round was against Rockwall Heath, who was undefeated, #1 team in the infamous high school rankings in the country. Like 39-0 or something. And we beat the tar out of them 2 days in a row and go to the state tournament and lose to a second rounder named Rob Zastarini, who I think is still pitching in the big leagues, big lefty.
Okay.
And so that showed he was a sophomore. Wow. And he was a leader. And then he made it back to the regional finals every year, his career. And it was always a different group of guys that were kind of the leaders of those teams. And in the select stuff, in the summertime, we'd play with the Arkansas Express team. 2 or 3 kids from down here would go up and play with them. A couple of them would come here, and that led to the Arkansas commitment. And so Willie had a chance to sign his junior year. He was pitching and throwing well, and had lat strains and shut him down. If you're a professional baseball player, you get a lat strain, they shut you down. You come back, 5 weeks later, and you're pitching again. Well, in college, that costs you your whole year.
Yep.
So he's going to go back, and he turned down some money. He was drafted and turned down some money because he thought he was better than that. And it happened again, and that ended his career.
Golly.
I think the way he handled that was something that because that's the way my career ended, injury. And it killed me. And he handled that much better than I handled it, because he knew, I believe in his heart, that he played as hard and as long as he could.
Wow.
And that's all you want your kids to do. Play as hard as long as they can, try and get better, and reach the highest level you possibly can as a player. And it can be done. It starts with 10-year-olds, and it doesn't start by changing teams. It starts by accepting coaching and letting your son or daughter who's playing softball just play the game and go out and not have an ego as a parent, and just watch them play. And we've talked about this in some of our other segments. You know, It's much better, in our opinion, to videotape a practice of your son hitting by himself or your daughter hitting by herself than it is to videotape an at-bat in the game. Applaud the effort, applaud the work, enjoy the game, and watch it and let him play. There's enough pressure on him. And I can tell you, as a player, as a kid, I can still remember walking in to the free throw line in the state tournament in Phoenix Veteran Memorial Coliseum and hearing my mom go, "Make it, Jim." I'm going, how did I hear that? And so I'm sitting there along the fence filming your son or daughter from 12 feet away. They know that's going on. It's extra pressure they don't need. The game's hard enough to play. So again, applaud the effort. I think I did my best. My wife and I did our best at letting that evolve. And that would be something at the end of his career, the way he handled that and understanding that I think he knew he did the best he could for as long as he could, is something I'm always going to be proud of.
That is amazing. And I want to say this because I got to take the opportunity if my mom listens to this. When I was a freshman at Air Academy High School, I was in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I was playing on the JV team. I got punched out looking, and I remember it was a late spring game, and all the girls were out right before a varsity game, and all the older girls are out, and I strike out, and I'm walking back to the dugout, and I hear my mom go, "Swing the bat, Rossi." And I looked over in the stands, and I accidentally flipped her off. I accidentally, and I hear my mom go, "Oh, she's from." She grew up in Southwest Minnesota on a farm. She didn't take stuff like that, but I remember she's like, I get home, my dad's like, "Hey, you can't be doing that stuff." And then I want to close with this. I hear Willie's story of not getting the opportunity. Maybe could have signed, after junior year. I had that same opportunity. And when I look back at it, I was drafted my junior year and I was drafted my senior year. And for anybody that's out there listening, I get this question regularly when they find out that I played professional baseball or was drafted and all that stuff. And I wish that in retrospect, I can't take it back, but I wish that I would have signed when I was right, when I was confident, when after my junior year of college, I felt so good about things. I was healthy. Strike while the iron's hot, because I feel like if I would have, maybe things would be different, would have been different with my playing career. I love my life, but I look back at that and I hear you say that about Willie, and there's part of me that's just like, ooh, because I don't know how well I handled it. I walked away from the game year 2. I just was like, I'm done. Mentally, I was out of it. But I feel that with Willie, because for you to say that you're proud of your son for handling that adversity well, that says a lot about how you and your wife raised him. And handling adversity is really the key. I mean, that's what your true character is how do you handle the adversity? And for all those kids, go ahead, Jim.
And too, by the way.
What's that?
It's how you win. You win by handling adversity.
Yeah, you're right.
You win by overcoming things that happen out of your control in games, especially in baseball, that you have no control over. And, a bad hop, a bad call, a wind-blown blooper that drives in 2 with 2 out. You just go, how do we overcome that? And you have to. And that's how champions become champions, overcoming things, just like Warren Morris overcame a broken hamate, right? Those things are legendary.
They are. Storytime with Schwank, episode 25, but this was our first segment. Jim, I can't thank you enough, man, for pouring in what you pour into for Baseball Forward. I'm having a blast doing it. I hope you're having a blast, and I cannot wait till our next Storytime with Schwank episode.
All right, buddy.
Take us out and say thank you to the fans or whoever you want to say thank you to.
I really appreciate this. I'm looking forward to getting involved with high school coaches and select coaches more and more, because those guys impact a lot of young men in the world today, and we need to help them as much as we can.
Amen. With that said, thank you for listening to this episode of the Baseball Forward podcast. We'll see you next week.